At the end of a relationship, many of us wonder what we could have done differently, what we could have done better, what we could have said to make this change. And I find that many of us find ourselves in a situation where we're constantly beating ourselves up, running through the thought process over and over again about what we could have said and how we could have changed it to make everything better. And why do we go through that? Why do we pontificate and pontificate on that? Why is that? And why does it feel like we're still in love or we're still missing this person? What's really happening mentally and emotionally when we're going through this process? Well, let's discuss that today. Hi friends, glad to be back today. And I find that many of us, after a breakup, question ourselves, get upset with ourselves, get angry with ourselves because we wish we would have said this or we wish we would have said that. And we didn't. We're holding on to a ton of regret, thinking that maybe just that one comment could have changed everything. But how do we get there? Because it seems, if you really think about it and take a step back, we're putting all that on our own shoulders. And remember, a relationship takes two people. So how can it be all your fault for everything that went down? Throughout the years and years of working with clients, I've realized that we have a tendency of turning the anger and disappointment and judgment internally after a breakup. And we do that because we end up judging ourselves for what we did wrong, because we couldn't get any closure or acceptance of wrongdoing from the other person. Now think about that. They wouldn't take responsibility for their actions. And because of that, we couldn't get anywhere in the conversations, we couldn't get anywhere in the argument, and we couldn't get any closure. So think about that. If you're in a relationship with someone that's not taking responsibility for any of their part they've played, what do you do? And the only options is to continue in the relationship, sweeping it under the rug and taking the blame. The other option is staying in the relationship, sweeping it under the rug and acting like nothing's wrong. Or the last option is to apologize for something you didn't do. And I think that over time that becomes harder and harder to do. But many of us have continued to do it throughout the entire relationship, maybe for years, taking the blame, accepting the blame, and moving on. So what I found is that it's a lot easier to blame ourselves and to beat ourselves up than trying to figure out why the other person wouldn't communicate, why the other person wouldn't talk or try to have any sort of agreement or consideration or closure. And many of you are dealing with relationships where you're picking up the pieces, and it's not really picking up the pieces of the relationship, it's actually picking up the pieces of your own identity. Because there's been so much of your identity lost in giving in and acquiescing day after day to keep the relationship going. So if you're in the position of you're still blaming and judging yourself for the breakup and what you didn't do, I need you to see the big picture. Because it's a lot easier to blame ourselves, and I'm not saying that there's not blame to go around, but what I am saying is that it's a lot easier to keep judging what we did instead of looking at the other side of the coin and realizing, okay, yes, maybe I could have said this in a more diplomatic way. Maybe I could have been more proactive. Maybe I could have brought this up for the 7th time and seen if they would have listened to me at all or understand where I was coming from. And I agree, it can be really painful because many of you are problem solvers. And I have another video that I'm working on right now too about dealing with breakup as a problem solver. Because when we're problem solvers, we want to solve all the problems, right? But we can't solve everything because we're not in charge of the other person. So it doesn't work that way. So I want you to think about that. If you're in this position right now, one of the best things you can begin to do is to start writing down those thoughts that you're having that come to you, that trigger you to be upset or angry or sad about the relationship ending, and writing those down and analyzing what are the things that I'm actually saying that I should have done, and have I done any of these things? Did I do a lot of these things in the relationship? Because what I find is that when the relationship is over, when we're still beating ourselves up, the actual things that we wish we would have done, we already did. We're just finding reason to continue to hash and rehash. and we're finding somebody to put the blame on, which happens to be us. I think it's interesting when I've worked with clients and there's an argument or a fight, and the fight never gets resolved. So the argument never gets resolved because the other person doesn't want to take any responsibility for any piece of the argument. And so I find that a lot of times, and oftentimes, that same person that isn't getting any sort of closure or help from the other person finally turns the argument internally, because that's all they can do, because nothing's getting resolved. And so I want you to just analyze this at this moment. Have I turned this entire breakup or divorce on me? Am I internalizing and taking am I internalizing this and accepting all the responsibility? Because it's not all your responsibility to take. And at this time, it's really start analyzing, start doing some journal dumps where you can start writing down your thoughts and really looking at this. Did I do this? Did I take care of this? But the big question is, and this is something that you really have to marinate on, was this person even receptive to coming to any sort of agreement? I find that many people are upset about a breakup, but the other person was not willing to work or come to the middle ground at all. And that's not a relationship. We have to give and take. We have to come together to try to find some sort of agreement to be able to be in a relationship, because it should be two whole people come together in a relationship, both people having the right to their feelings, having their right to the emotions. And so I want you to really analyze that. If you're going through this, writing up that list and analyzing, really seeing the fact that there wasn't really anything else you could do, realizing that you are beating yourself up, and begin to forgive yourself for the relationship not working. It takes two for a relationship not to work. And so if you're in that situation, you may need to get closure on your own. And by getting closure on your own, it means by forgiving yourself for being in the relationship. And I work with clients to do that, where we actually write a letter to ourselves, we work on the journal dumping, we work on the internalization, the thoughts that we have that are swirling around, that's creating this sadness. And the sadness is really not about the relationship being ended, it's about us not being able to solve the problem. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, and it really helps us to know that we're doing something right. And on the comment section, let me know, are you going through something like this? Have you been able to forgive yourself for the problems in the relationship? This is a big question. Many of us beat ourselves up over and over and over again. But remember, it takes two people to come together to deal with a problem and to find solution. And if you're the only one that's trying to find solution, that's not a relationship. And the fact that you couldn't solve the problem of two people and one person you can't control, we really need to analyze that and realize that's something that you probably couldn't do. And your judgment of not being able to do that is something that's not even feasible or possible. And so we're actually judging ourselves against something that we actually cannot do, which creates even more havoc, judgment, and sadness, because we internalize that feeling and we begin to feel smaller and smaller over something that we had no control over. Oh, by the way, we have membership options here on YouTube. You can join, and there's exclusive content for members only. So if you have a chance, check that option out. And in the meantime, don't forget to live your true life.